So I'm Aram Moshayedi. I'm a curator at the Hammer Museum. This is my talking partner, Luziah. You want to introduce
Hi,
yourself?
Aram. Aram and I met in a wonderful Greek island in Hydra. And Aram is very, very brilliant. I just follow him around. But thank you for coming, all of you. And Aram, you're going to start, right?
Well, we're gonna just walk over together to go to Franco Nero, and we'll talk about our work there. So why don't we just go there?
It's really been great to be in Torino, don't you think?
Yeah, it's been good. We had a nice day. I think we saw some good exhibitions, don't you think?
Well, you know, Torino is a city that's really, really beautiful. And it has lots and lots of surprises. And the people are wonderful, but the best thing is like the food is delicious, but it's just a really great place to have an art fair. I think this art fair is like really friendly and very manageable, and you can breathe.
Yeah, it's true. Absolutely. Did you say magical? Because we did have an encounter today at the Mario Mertz Foundation where that woman said that it's a magical place, and she started talking about the supernatural, which I thought was really interesting. This is my first time here, so I haven't had any of those experiences.
Well, I came the first time a long, long time ago because Franco Noero invited me, and I saw this wonderful artist, Laura Favaretto, at the Palazzo Rivoli, and now Franco is also showing this artist. We are here at Franco's booth. This blue door is really, really great. It has a history, this blue door. It comes from a deserted bank in Monte Carlo. A very young and brilliant curator called Swad Gurava Malaki. She was walking by the street one day and she sees this beautiful building and she wanted to do something. So she asked, "What are you doing with this space?" And they said, "Nothing, it's empty." She said, "Can I have it?" And out of this was born this wonderful show of a very great English artist called Mike Nelson. And in this particular art piece, he painted the whole bank blue on the inside of the bank. And this door comes, it's been, you say in Italian, destaccata. So it's part of the installation. So you'll all walk through the door. It's like Alice in Wonderland, you know? Aaron, you first.
Thanks. So, do you know that this door was cut from the excised from the original building, right? And do you know anything about the significance of the color blue? Why the room was blue? I only know that it was this specific pigment from Afghanistan that was used to create
I
space.
don't know, but I think the person that we should ask.
The magic door is coming out from this project. That is a project from the Nouveau Musée National Monaco that was done in 2016 in Monaco. The Musée National Monaco is a very interesting museum in Monaco, in Monte Carlo, and is supporting wonderful projects. And one of them was the project of Mike. There was an off-site project because there was this not an abandoned, but an empty building for still empty. That was a former headquarter of UBS, the bank, the Union, the Bank Suisse, the Swiss bank. There was they gave it to the museum in for use the space. The space is in the center of Monaco and is a kind of a tall building, but not so large, with 7 stories. And Mike was able to do a project there and painting everything and every single detail of the interior of the building in blue, ultramarine blue.
But why
So
blue?
why blue? Blue because the ultramarine blue was in the past was produced by a pigment. A pigment is coming from lapis lazuli, and was at that time, in the past. There was a moment when the lapis lazuli was, because of the pigment, was more expensive than gold and was a commodity. So the fact that it was a commodity, he linked it to the bank and the fact that the bank was in front of the sea in Monaco, and this was a very, very extraordinary effect. This is a book that, as you can see, is all blue, and the interior is also all blue, and you can see the project here, portrayed here. And then, you know, what Mike did when the show ran for an entire summer, the summer of 2016 in Monaco. And then the space was closed again. And then he came back in September and decided to chop the building in parts. And he built a sort of an archaeological a museum, let's call it like that, or collection in our gallery. And he had this fantastic show that was in 2016 also.
Franco, this is one of my favorite artists, Laura Favaretto.
Lara did this wonderful series of pieces in 2015, as again in St. Petersburg for Manifesta, and she produced, or she created those 14, 16, I don't remember exactly, block of cement, where concrete, where she impressed her presence somehow. And this was not the first time I was doing that, but was one of the most important pieces from this series. And this is coming from the same series of Manifesta.
Please tell them about Laura's installation in Liverpool Biennial, because it was an amazing installation where she had this huge piece of granite and there was an opening and you were supposed to make a donation, and part of the work, yeah, and you could hear the coins dropping, and then at the end of the Biennale they destroyed it and the money was for the Syrian refugees. And I believe she also redid that.
We did that in Münster for Proiectes Cultur Münster last year. And they just opened the first one because she did two of them. They're huge, enormous block of marble that are empty inside, and you have a slot where you can put the money, the coins. And they just destroyed one, and they found something like 40,000 euros, which was kind of a nice donation.
So Aram, where are we going next?
A rodeo. Shahryar he's a Swiss Iranian artist who now lives in Los Angeles, and he's somebody that I'd worked with before at the museum. And this series of works began from an exhibition that was at 356 Mission, which is a kind of interesting space that's run by Laura Owens, Gavin Brown, and Wendy Yao in Los Angeles. It's kind of somewhere between a commercial space and something more of like a kind of artist-run space. And for this exhibition, he developed these pieces called Yay High. And I don't know the specific one that's subtitled here, because usually they have a specific subtitle that's related to the name of the art handler who installed the work. And so the height of this line, it's a kind of directive piece where he'll have the art handler oil up their right arm with a kind of like oil, and then lean into the piece at the designated height. This is obviously a taller art handler than I am. But the first one kind of came out of this really great guy named Oliver, who's the art handler at 356 Mission. And if you look on Instagram, he has a special hashtag, sweet preparator, because everybody loves him. He's very sweet. And so that one was kind of more my height. And you could imagine just like the preparator leaning his oily arm into the surface of the work. And why I think this is kind of interesting in some ways is that Shahryar, in some ways, and I wouldn't say this entirely with his work, but is kind of thinking through a history of minimalism and post-minimalism, and specifically a kind of lack of sensuality or kind of physicality of the body that's often avoided when discussions of those work. So in some ways, you know, one way we've compared Shahryar to like a minimalist artist who in an installation that was like a kind of pink Turrell-like room, we said it was like a kind of like dance hall minimalism or kind of disco minimalism or something. But this, you know, has that kind of physical presence of the body in some ways in the work. So
I discovered this artist because of Sylvia. She's called Banu. She's a young Turkish artist living in Berlin at the moment. And it comes from a saying, which was in Documenta in Münster. And it comes... it's on top of a building and it says, being safe is scary. So these two letters come from that sentence. And she did a fabulous, amazing installation in Documenta where, I mean, I think, Sylvia, you have to explain the work of Banu, which I think is like a monumental work.
These two letters come from the sentence, being safe is scary, which was like a graffiti that Banu saw in Athens, that she wanted to transfer to Kassel when she was invited to do a work on both cities. The Museum Fridericianum is a museum that was built in the 19th century, and then the designer, the graphic designer that made the font, designed the letters that said Museum Fridericianum, had only written those words, these two words. Like, so there was not like a complete alphabet. So the amazing part was how to construct the letters to fill the phrase "being safe is scary," which was, you know, like Banu's piece in Athens was totally "being safe is scary," by the way, because she did this incredible monument on the diary of a Kurdish guerrilla fighter that she found in Istanbul in a bookshop in 2014, it's a book that it's impossible to kind of circulate today. Anyway, so going back to the letters, they had to design the S, for example, pre-existed because it's part of the Museum Fridericianum phrase, whereas the G is the letter that they had to create from scratch. And imagine what would the graphic designer, do in like 1890s when the museum was built. Yeah, they're two different works. They're unique, and there's 6 of them in total.
Do any of you know the Gallery Palazzo from Brescia? It's a really, really great gallery. They're very, very young, and it's in a fabulous palazzo. And they work with very young artists that overnight the whole world starts to talk about.
That's where we're going right now.
Yeah. So Francesca is one of the owners of Palazzo Gallery, and she worked with this artist that had a big scandal in LA. You remember the artist Ibrahim Mahama?
Yeah, right. Oh, the scandal with Stefan Simkowitz, right?
Yes.
For works that were apparently
Well, he did this
kind of
big
promised
work.
produce, right?
No, he did this really big work, and they bought it, and then they divided the works and made this poor young Ghanaian artist to sign certificates of authenticity. So they paid him like 150,000, and then breaking up the works and selling them, it was like millions. So all the artist community came together and said, like, you can't do this. You can't cheat artists like this. So now we're in front of a great work of another female artist. It seems to be the night of women tonight, huh? So this artist is called Nathalie de Pasquier, and she is French, but living in Milan. And we have my old pal, Francesca from Galleria Palazzo. So Francesca, are you going to enlighten everybody about this work? Thanks.
Hi, everyone. So Nathalie de Pasquier, she's an artist living in Milan. She moved to Milan in late 17 when she became a founder member of Memphis, the design collective. And since then, she worked as a designer and then as an artist. So between 81 and 87, she collaborated with the Memphis group. And after the Memphis, she dedicated her career to paintings. So she was invited to do this work for the section Back to the Future this year, which is devoted to the 80s. But she really wanted to englobe the work that she was doing at the time in a kind of a time capsule. So she decided to present a cabinet which is painted by her. And inside you can see she showing her archive, which is a sort of mix of reproduction and reproduction of her archive and some original drawing at the time.
What were the original designs kind of imagined for, or did they have kind of specific context?
She was drawing patterns all the time, like a surface for decorative surface, so patterns mainly. And none of them they were becoming something like an object or a textile, but most of them they were for some future projects.
Mm.
So listen, I hope she's going to participate with your gallery next year in Art of the Treasure Hunt in Tuscany and paint some great walls of wineries for us.
Does she do that? Does she do like commissioned work like that?
She likes commission work actually, and she just opened an exhibition at the Camden Art Center where she basically worked on walls more than bringing her paintings. She wanted to invade the space with the wallpaper, wall paintings, more like a.
Are the more recent paintings kind of in this vein, or they're
The recent paintings are these kind of a
more like this?
geometrical,
Right.
abstract, but, again from like a natura morta in a sense.
So not the same kind of patterning, but just like the same kind of geometric kind of
Geometrical
language, but
language,
there's more of a
yes.
sense of ground and things like that.
Correct.
One,
You know, we didn't think about this, but we seem to have like almost chosen a lot of female artists.
it's true, it's a good mix.
We have Nathalie de Pasquier, Laura Favaretto, and now we're going to have a young woman, young in spirit, Beverly Pepper. She was born in 1922.
So this is Colleen from KAYNE, GRIFFIN, CORCORAN from Los Angeles. We thought to point out these works by Beverly Pepper, who's an artist that I've only gotten to know relatively recently, though she's been working since the mid 60s, early 60s. These are works from the 1980s that I know are steel, iron, and bronze. So heavy metals, right?
Steel as well.
Oh, what's the significance of Corten steel?
Well, she started working with the Corten because it had this aged look, and so it was already like embedded in this kind of history. So all of her works are always connected to something of the past.
Cortins is like very common in Italy. Like if you want to have a big glass door, they always offer you cortins because it's a very resistant material and it looks very beautiful. You said that she's making a big donation.
My donation to the city of Todi, 23 sculptures.
When are they going to inaugurate that? That's going to be really.
Spring 2018.
This is like later work than what I, kind of what I was talking about before. This is from the 80s, and I like it because it's almost like it becomes so decorative and kind of weird, totemic. You don't know if they're functional or somehow like extracted from some other thing or kind of segments of other things, but they also have this kind of appearance of like accumulation, and then also the hand painting, right, is a significant thing.
Yeah, very significant. These works came at a time when, just to give a little bit of autobiography, she lost somebody close to her and stopped making work, went dormant for a year. And at the end of that year, she made these works. So I think getting back to her roots of being a painter was significant, and making these kind of smaller, intimate works that required a lot of detail.
I think it's our last artist that we're going to show. And his name is Alberto Peri. He's Italian. He lives in Rome. And it's sort of like, I don't know, it's very happy. It's very colorful. It's very joyful. And sort of like, I don't know, like in Italian, I don't know, do you think it's very Italian aesthetic? Or do you think, if you didn't know, would you say that it could be an American artist from LA?
I don't know. It could be. I think it's nice to actually describe the work before we get there too. So then maybe people can tell us if we're accurate or inaccurate. But I think it seems, it's definitely got that kind of a plastic kind of finish. It's like a big box of balls. It's plexi, right?
Yeah.
But then with the colors, it ends up being, almost like a kind of, I don't know, creates like optical effects given the different like intersections of the pieces of plexiglass with each other. But it also seems to try to represent like a big like jar of marbles or something, wouldn't you say?
This just like, every child loves balls. People have big balls, small balls, and, cats play with balls, children play with balls. So it's like for me, I really like this piece because it's really happy.
As a collector, is that something that you're interested in? Like kind of big happy work with like kind of joyous bouncing balls in them?
No, not at all. I just look at things that I like, and I really like this work, but I'm not sure that I would buy this work, but I think it's sort of a very institutional type of work. And
That's what people say when it's big.
Well, you know, in some countries you can have big works, in some countries you can't. So, and I don't like to buy things that you can't take out and see or look at it all the time. I know that, you know, real collectors buy things and people have lots and lots of warehouses full of absolutely amazing art which they circulate. But there are different types of collectors. I think it's a good way to end our talk with this very happy, young, colorful work. Alberto Peri and Eduardo Secchi, he's also, this must be the young section. He's a very young gallerist from Florence. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the work,
Sure.
Eduardo?
So the work is by Alfredo Pirri, as she said, and it starts from the maquette that you see on the side. This is a maquette he did in 2003 for a project of a monumental space he was supposed to do in Rome, and it discusses Earth and volcano and the strength of the power of this eruption. So in the booth we were talking about color and the dialogue between two different artists of two generations, Alfredo Pirri and Alice Brown, an English artist. She's very, very young. She's 30 years old. And so he thought about reproducing this as an explosion of colors, but doing it with his material, which is usually plexiglass, and using this light conceptual material, which is plexiglass, but at the same time giving it this very strong tension. Imagine that this structure, which is approximately 400 kilos, is held by that small, tiny screw. It can explode in any moment. So it's just like a volcano of colors.
Well, and is this based on a specific experiment or something?
It's based on his idea, on his concept, on his art, because he uses light, but behind the pieces. Every piece he does is usually completely neutral on the front. For example, look at this. This is a neutral piece of plexiglass, and on the back of it there is the color. But the color of the back is very, very strong, very intense. It's acrylic color, which you actually don't see from the front, but it reverberates on the back. It lights up the piece. So in the idea of the volcano, of the eruption, is more about an eruption of colors. You see, it's totally white. Yes, this is my dog.
We have a new
Yes,
guest star
we have
for
yes,
today's
we do.
episode.
Yeah. So it's an eruption of colors. It's the idea of something that can be created with light.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.